hear them claim in their defense that I don't have any right to privacy is disgusting. They have made my wife's life an absolute misery, my lord.
She actually went, hey, ho! Look at this, there they are dancing. Does this seem like a woman whose life is total misery? Doesn't to me, does it you?
You know that very specific silence right before everything kicks off, when the room goes weirdly still and the air feels loaded, like everybody can sense something is about to blow up. That was the mood around London's High Court this week, just with fewer broken glasses and more wigs, legal robes, and royal headlines. Right in the middle of it was the Duke of Sussex, a man who talks a lot about privacy, while also living very publicly through major interviews, streaming deals, and a huge memoir, now asking the court to see him as the one who was wronged. If you've been scrolling X, yeah, the app still known to half the world as Twitter, you've probably seen the wild posts flying around already. The headlines were loud, messy, and built for drama. Now, fair is fair. A lot of the online chatter went way past the facts.
These are the type of images that we now see put out by the couple themselves. So of course, Brittany, I absolutely fundamentally agree with you that this case is ludicrous. It is about personal revenge. He wants newspapers to be shut down. They're already dying. It's going to happen anyway, Harry. And he wants journalists who he dislikes to go to jail.
His legal team did not walk out, and the case did not suddenly fall apart. But that does not mean nothing happened, because the courtroom tension was very real, and Harry's appearance definitely gave people a lot to talk about. This whole case is one of the strangest and most high-profile privacy fights in recent memory. That is what makes it hit so hard. Here you have a prince who has personally revealed deeply private details about his own life in public, and now he is part of a case accusing newspaper figures of crossing major lines to get private information. That contrast is exactly why people cannot stop watching. And this is not some tiny one-person complaint either.
Prince Harry's most shocking moments in the dock, and from his witness statement today, you won't get that anywhere else. And analysis from Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack, who was in the High Court today for every word of the bombshell ever.
It is a major multi-claimant lawsuit that also involves Sir Elton John, Sadie Frost, and Doreen Lawrence, with claims that Associated Newspapers, the company behind the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday, ran unlawful information-gathering tactics over a long stretch of time. The allegations are serious stuff. We are talking claims about cars being bugged, landlines being tapped, and private records being bought, the kind of thing that sounds less like normal reporting and more like some backroom operation. The publisher has flatly denied it all, saying the claims are false and calling them outrageous smears. So yeah, the noise is crazy, but the real story is in the details.
Tell us that you were aware of some, but not all, of the 14 articles that you complain of in these proceedings at the time they were published.
Yes.
You did not complain, and no complaint was made on your behalf.
Not that I am aware of.
That is because you believed at the time that the articles were published, insofar as you saw them, that the information they contained came from legitimate sources.
To a certain extent, but I would not have been able to complain about them anyway because of the institution I was in. It would have been very difficult. Never complain and never explain.
Let's actually break down what went down in court. Because whether you support Harry or think he's completely off track, this trial is seriously interesting once you strip away the noise. First, that rumor that blew up everywhere online? Yeah, the one that had people thinking everything was falling apart mid-trial. The 9-week case kicked off on January 19, 2026. Tension already high, cameras watching, headlines ready. Then suddenly, social media goes wild with claims that Prince Harry's legal team, led by David Sherborne, had just walked out right in the middle of proceedings. The story spread fast and hard. People were saying Harry must be impossible to deal with, that even a top lawyer known for handling massive cases couldn't stick around. It sounded dramatic, messy, and honestly, perfectly built for clicks. But here's the truth, and it's way less chaotic. Nobody walked out, nobody quit, and David Sherborne is still right there leading the case,
A campaign, an obsession of having every aspect of my life under surveillance so they could get the run on their competitors and drive me paranoid beyond belief, isolating me and probably wanting to drive me to drugs and drinking to sell more of their paper.
The trial is moving forward exactly as planned. No confirmed drama, no sudden collapse. That viral story was straight up false. Now here's where it gets kind of ironic. And yeah, you can't ignore this part. Harry is literally in court arguing about misinformation and privacy, while at the exact same time, the internet is spreading false stories about his case, about misinformation. That's layers on layers. But let's not pretend this is just bad luck. When someone spends years publicly criticizing the press, calling out media behavior, and exposing their own version of events, it changes how every news story about them gets treated.
Never suspicious of Chelsea in relation to stories like this, but I was of her friend. If I saw this story at the time, I would have been very frustrated and angry. I would have questioned how Associated found out this information, but at the same time, I would have felt like I had to accept this as the reality of my life. This sort of intrusion was terrifying for Chelsea. It made her feel like she was being hunted and the press had caught her. And it was terrifying for me too, because there was nothing I could do to stop it. And now she was in my world. She was shaken and I was really paranoid about trying to protect our privacy, as the article says. Their behavior and treatment of Chelsea was not normal. I was really worried something bad was going to happen.
The benefit of the doubt? That's gone fast. So why is he even back in London for this? According to the defense, Associated Newspapers is basically saying this whole case doesn't hold weight. Their lead barrister, Anthony White KC, has already described the claims as weak and stretched, arguing there's just not enough solid ground behind them. The defense didn't hold back at all. They basically said this case is built on shaky ground, calling it little more than guesswork, and accusing the claims of jumping to conclusions without solid proof. That's not a soft pushback, that's a direct hit. And they didn't stop there. It's not just, we didn't do it, even though they strongly deny everything. They also pushed a second angle that could shut the whole thing down, the timing. In the UK, you usually get 6 years to bring a privacy case, and some of the events being talked about go way back to the 90s and early 2000s.
Who has violated Harry's privacy more? Is it the person who shared, the palace official who shared a little bit about the memory of his mother, or Harry telling us that he had to rub cream on his penis before his brother's wedding because it was frostbitten? So I don't think anybody's violated Harry's privacy more than Harry.
So their argument is simple but sharp. If this really happened, why wait this long? Why now? Harry and the others had access to top lawyers and serious resources for years, so the delay raises eyebrows whether people like it or not. But here's where it gets interesting. Back in November 2023, Justice Nicklin looked at this exact argument and said, not so fast. In a detailed ruling, he decided the defense hadn't done enough to shut the case down early. No quick win, no easy exit. The case moves forward to a full trial.
He seemed uneasy from the moment he arrived. He didn't really settle properly in the witness box, and he came in right from the off. Harry was on the defensive and very bristly and very abrasive, and the judge intervened 3 times to try and calm him down.
So now we're in the thick of it, and Harry's side is painting a much heavier picture. They're not talking about minor issues. They're alleging serious invasions. Things like phone interception, landline monitoring, private investigators digging into personal lives, even claims about devices placed in cars and private records being accessed in questionable ways. If any of that holds up, that's a major problem. Harry's own statement adds another layer, and this is where it gets more personal. He talks about years of feeling watched, like private moments weren't actually private at all. Relationships breaking down because information kept, leaking, trust collapsing, because he believed people close to him might be talking. He describes pulling away, cutting people off, and becoming deeply suspicious of those around him.
No idea she was a journalist. I never used the name Mr. Mischief.
Did you meet her in Ibiza?
I don't think that can be right. I don't believe I have ever been to Ibiza other than with my now wife. My social circles were not leaky. I want to make that absolutely clear. I would have to cut contact with this person.
In his own words, I felt like my every move, thought, or feeling was being tracked and monitored just for the mail to make money out of it. That's not just a legal argument. That's someone describing what they say felt like constant pressure closing in. Now look, let's be real for a second, because this part gets tricky. If someone was actually tracking you, listening in, crossing those lines, yeah, that's disturbing. No debate there. Anyone in that situation would feel on edge, questioning everything around them.
I'm going to give Harry a message. This fight of your life, what did he say? Slaying the dragon slayer. Harry, you will not win this. You cannot win this. These newspapers, these media companies that you so despise will still be prospering long after you've gone, long after I've gone. So you can't win this war. It's foolish.
But here's where people start raising eyebrows. At the same time, Harry has shared a huge amount of his personal life publicly. Through interviews, a book, a documentary, podcasts, the whole lot. So when the message is, leave me alone, but the appearances keep coming, it starts to feel a bit mixed. That contradiction is exactly what critics are jumping on. Now let's get to the moment everyone was waiting for, the one the headlines were built around. January 21st, 2026, Harry takes the stand. Around 2.5 hours of testimony, and the tension in that courtroom was real. Then came the cross-examination, and this is where things got sharp. Anthony White. KC didn't ease into it. He went straight at the claims, questioning where the information actually came from. His angle was clear. Maybe this wasn't illegal activity. Maybe it came from people within Harry's own circle.
He's not the first member of the royal family to write a book, but he is certainly the only member of the royal family to have written a book this explosive.
And Harry, well, he didn't keep things short. He started answering, then expanded, then shifted into broader points about the media, the pressure, the impact it had on his life. It became less about specific claims and more about the bigger picture. At one point, it got emotional. His voice cracked while talking about Meghan, saying the press made her life an absolute misery. You could see the frustration there. It wasn't fake, it felt real. But here's the reality check. A courtroom is not a sit-down interview, and it's definitely not a place where emotions carry the argument. Judges aren't there to unpack feelings. They want clear, direct answers tied to actual evidence. And when things drift too far off track, that can hurt more than it helps. Judge Nicklin stepped in more than once, and he wasn't soft about it either. He basically told Harry straight, "You're doing what a lot of people in court do, talking too much instead of answering the actual question."
I've never believed that my life is open season to be commercialized by these people. To act in the public interest is to interest the public. I fundamentally reject that. Having my life, like others, commercialized in this way since I was a teenager, delving into every aspect of my private life, listening to calls, blagging flights so they could see where I was going. It was a time when everyone was in competition with each other. To sit here and go through this again, and to hear them claim in their defense that I don't have any right to privacy is disgusting. They have made my wife's life an absolute misery.
The message was simple: stick to yes or no and stop turning answers into speeches. Now the media jumped on that fast, calling it a shutdown, even a humiliation. But let's not stretch it too far. Judges do this all the time, especially when someone starts drifting off topic. That part alone isn't some rare dramatic moment, but here's where it gets a bit ironic. Harry has spent years saying he wants to be treated like everyone else, not handled differently because of his title. Well, This is exactly what that looks like.
He was asked questions, and rather than actually specifically answer them, he kept saying, it's disgusting what they did to us. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. And in the end, the judge said, look, it's not your job to emote. It's not your job to tell us here on the stand. It's not your job to tell us whether you think this behavior is disgusting or not. It is your job to specifically answer the questions you are asked.
In court, regular people get cut off when they ramble. No special treatment, no extra patience. That's equality in action, whether it feels good or not. Now, from the defense side, the strategy is pretty clear, and it's sharp. They're trying to paint a picture that weakens Harry's claims without even needing to prove some big conspiracy. Anthony White, KC, basically said it outright, suggesting that at key moments, Harry's own social circle was already a source of information. Translation: they're hinting that no illegal tactics were even necessary. If information was already leaking through people around him, that changes the whole narrative. Then things got more uncomfortable. The case brought up journalist Katie Nicholl with claims from Harry's side that her stories were tied to questionable methods. But the response from the other side flips that completely. They say she didn't need anything secretive because Harry himself invited her into his world. A private event at Kensington Roof Gardens back in 2003. She attends, observes, gathers details, and later publishes.
Harry also says she's a crim. Katie Nicholl responds, saying, "No, Harry, you invited me to come and party with you."
If that version holds, it creates a messy contradiction. Because now it's not about hidden surveillance, it's about access that was openly given at the time. And that's a tough angle to explain away. And then it takes another turn. One of the supposed supporting witnesses, private investigator Gavin Burrows, pulled back his statement in 2024. He claimed his signature was used without permission and that the document wasn't even properly authorized by him. That's not a small detail. When a key piece of support starts falling apart like that, it gives the defense even more room to question how solid the overall case really is. Yeah, that moment hit hard. The Mail's legal team jumped on it instantly, pushing the idea that it weakens a big chunk of the case. Harry's side says it doesn't change anything important, but visually, in terms of how it looks, it's rough. And this is where things get tricky. In cases like this, it's not always just about who's technically right. It's also about who's controlling the story. People believe. Legal wins matter, but public perception can shape everything around it. Now we have to talk about the book, because there was no way it wasn't coming into this. Spare got pulled straight into the argument, and honestly, it makes sense why.
Day before he was in the High Court, Meghan Markle released an Instagram story, and her mum was in the pool, her daughter was in the swimming pool. Meghan was filming that and their garden. If you do not want your privacy invaded, cut off the oxygen supply for the press. They will eventually get bored.
In that memoir, Harry shared a lot. Personal experiences, relationships, past behavior, details most people would never put out there. So the defense angle is obvious. If you've already revealed so much yourself, how can you now claim your privacy was violated in the same way? That question is exactly what they want people thinking. But Harry's response is actually more structured than people give it credit for. He's saying this isn't about sharing, it's about control. There's a difference between choosing what to reveal and having information taken without permission. Think of it like this. Letting someone into your home by choice is not the same as someone forcing their way in. One is controlled, the other crosses a line. That's the argument he's standing on. And legally, that distinction can matter a lot. But here's where the tension kicks in again. Outside the courtroom, people don't always separate those two ideas cleanly. Because when someone has already shared extremely personal stories publicly, it becomes harder for the audience to fully accept the idea that privacy is their top priority above everything else. It creates that disconnect, and once that doubt is there, it sticks. So picture this.
he was actually quite sympathetic, and he was quite like, look, let me just tell you, your job now is just to answer these questions. Let your legal team answer the case.
The judge alone who makes this decision. So Harry, acting like an entitled little brat on the stand, is not just bad news for his own case, it's bad news for Elton John and David Furnish and Sadie Frost and Elizabeth Hurley and all of the other.
He flies in from Montecito, from that polished California life, steps away from the cameras for a moment, and lands straight in a British courtroom, arguing his privacy has been crossed. You don't even need spin here. The contrast alone is loud. And that's exactly where the defense benefits without doing much. The situation almost builds their argument for them. It creates this image that's easy for people to question whether that's fair or not. Here's the real issue, though, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. Even if some of what Harry is saying is true, the way his story has been told over the years starts to work against him. Think about the pattern. Interviews, documentaries, the book. It all points in one direction, that he's been wronged by family, by the system, by the press. Now pause there for a second. When every angle leads to the same conclusion, people naturally start asking harder questions. Not because everything is false, but because consistency without pushback can start to feel one-sided. And the defense is clearly leaning into that. They're not just arguing facts, they're shaping perception. The goal is simple: make Harry look like someone who always has a complaint, and suddenly the audience stops focusing on the actual claims. That's the move. Because once people tune out emotionally, even serious allegations lose impact. It's harsh, but it's smart strategy. And this is not just theory. Roya Nika from the Sunday Times pointed out something important during coverage in early 2026. If Harry loses, the damage goes beyond money. Because pushing all the way to trial instead of settling raises the stakes massively. He had the option to resolve this quietly, potentially walk away with something and close the chapter. But he didn't take that route. He chose to go all in, to stand in court and try to prove his version of events fully. That takes confidence, no question. But let's be honest, it can also look like stubbornness depending on how this ends. And that's the risk he accepted. Now zoom out for a second. Strip away the personalities, the headlines, all of that. This case could shape how media behaviors judge for years to come. Because underneath all the noise, this is really about where the line gets drawn and who gets to decide when it's been crossed. And let's not forget, Harry is not standing alone in this. You've got some very serious names involved: Sir Elton John, Sadie Frost, and Doreen Lawrence, who has spent years fighting for justice after her son's tragic case. This isn't just celebrity drama. These are people bringing heavy claims into court. Because if what they're saying is true, this goes way beyond annoying paparazzi moments. We're talking about allegations of illegal surveillance, accessing private information without permission, and tactics that sound more like something out of a thriller than everyday reporting. Things like phone interception, listening devices, private records being obtained in questionable ways. It's serious stuff. And if even part of that is proven, the consequences could be massive for the publisher involved. But here's where it gets complicated, and you can't ignore this part. Harry might actually be both the weakest and strongest face of this whole fight at the same time. Weakest because people already have strong opinions about him. He's high profile, constantly in the spotlight, and for some, that makes it easier to dismiss what he's saying before even looking at the details. But also strongest because he has reach. Whether people agree with him or not, he brings attention. You can't just ignore the story when someone with that level of visibility pushes it forward. And results matter too. This isn't happening in a vacuum. In a previous case in 2023, a court found that unlawful information gathering had taken place in relation to another publisher, and Harry was awarded compensation. Then later, another major outlet chose to settle before trial, including a public apology and a significant payout. So when people say he's just imagining things, that argument isn't as simple as it sounds. There is already legal history here that supports parts of what he's been arguing, and that leads to the bigger question. Why is this current publisher fighting so aggressively instead of settling? Because the stakes are huge. If this case goes the same way, it's not just about one lawsuit anymore. It could start forcing real changes in how stories are gathered, especially when it comes to privacy boundaries. And if that happens, the entire approach behind certain types of reporting could be pushed into the spotlight in a way it hasn't been before. And if he loses, things flip fast. The headlines will run wild, framing it as total vindication, like this whole fight was exaggerated from the start. That's how quickly the narrative can turn. But don't get it twisted. This isn't just about one person winning or losing. This case is bigger than that. It's about where the line sits between journalism and crossing into someone's private life without permission. That line matters more than any single headline. As this 9-week trial keeps unfolding, with more high-profile testimony expected, the pressure is only building. Big names stepping in, more details coming out, and every moment getting picked apart in real time. Now here's where you need to stay sharp. The truth is rarely clean in cases like this. It's probably not one side completely right and the other completely wrong. Harry isn't some perfect victim with no flaws, but at the same time, it's hard to believe everything on the other side is spotless either. This is not heroes versus villains. It's messy people, messy systems, and a collision that's been building for years. And that's exactly why it's so unpredictable. The final outcome won't even land until months after everything wraps up around late March 2026. So for now, it's all tension, arguments, and shifting narratives. And Harry? He's not going to suddenly change overnight. He'll keep speaking emotionally, even when it might not help his case. He'll keep flying back and forth, still pushing his side of the story. He'll stay exactly who he's been this whole time. And let's be honest, that's part of why people keep watching. Agree or disagree, he keeps the attention locked in. But don't go anywhere just yet, because this whole privacy debate has another side that gets just as strange. Some people are trying to protect their image, while others are desperate to control how they're seen, and it doesn't always go how they expect. Next up, we're getting into the internet turning on Brooklyn Beckham and what that says about status, image, and the pressure to prove yourself. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.